Right, part two of this fascinating talk with Sarah Water, creative, dancer background, jewellery maker, and you were talking about the journey from dance choreography into jewellery, which you wanted something that, from you could, that was visible, that you could see, that was tangible, that would have legacy and so on. And then you were saying something fascinating just between this, before I put the camera back on, which I think we should pick up on this point, where you said, well, dancers particularly are always going to have to consider what they're going to do next, because...
Yeah. Often in a dance studio, you will find if someone's not really needed in that moment, they'll be sitting in the corner with a book, studying what they might be doing in 5 years' time.
Is that just because that dance particularly, I've had it many times, you know, any type of dance, ballet, street dance, whatever, you're doing whatever, there's only going to be a certain amount of time that you're going to be able to, that either you'll be able to do it, or that commercially, there's a commercial window.
Contemporary dance has a little bit more freedom to it, so there are the possibilities of continuing to dance for your whole career, which is great. But the question is always there. Right. What am I going to do if I can't dance anymore, if I get injured and it's impossible, or I find that I'm just done with it. Yeah, and this, what I think is fascinating about what you're saying here, Sarah, is that I'm always drawing parallels between creativity and when somebody's an athlete, and I guess that particularly sometimes there's a real obvious kind of tie-in, and I think that somebody in sport, they'll have to ask themselves similar questions. Yeah. If I'm football or whatever it might well be, actually what's going to happen if I'm injured or on my career? And for you, what were those, as you were thinking about those times where you sat there with the book, what were you thinking? I was thinking that I knew I didn't want to be a dance teacher. I was surrounded by so many excellent teachers, and I didn't feel like there was much wiggle room for me, there much space to I couldn't find that. I became a trained yoga teacher because I thought it would be something else to offer, and instead actually I ended up teaching normal people, non-dancers, which I found much more
to dance.
No, to yoga.
Oh, yoga, yeah.
So that was my way of teaching and kind of putting back without becoming a dance teacher. Yeah. There was a point where I knew I wanted to be hands-on creative, but I wasn't sure I wanted to carry on with choreography as such, although the jewellery is choreography, really. Tell
me a bit about that. I love the way you said that. I can't not but then ask about that. In what way is it? Because you really got to think about the piece, how it's going to thread together, how it's going to look, how it, you know.
When I went back to university, I had been doing jewellery evening classes for 7 years, running from the dance studio to my jewellery evening class to learn kind of basic jewellery techniques. It was something I was kind of ticking over in my mind. And after 7 years I realised I was kind of a bit obsessed.
I'm curious, well it's interesting you use the word obsessed, because it seems to me, and the sessions I do at the British Library and from chatting to lots of people, there seems to have been, I don't know if you would agree, a huge resurgence in jewellery makers. I seem to be meeting or hearing of so many people in terms of making jewellery, and many of them seem to be transfixed by it, seem to really... So what is it? I mean, maybe it's because I never really wore much jewellery, and maybe, I don't know, maybe a difference between males and females in terms of jewellery and what that particularly, what that means or what it evokes. What is it about jewellery? I guess that it's been around probably since we've been adorning ourselves, but what's the appeal? What is it that makes jewellery fascinating, that calls to you in terms of jewellery?
It's touching the metal.
Yeah.
It's the attention to detail.
Right.
It's the long process from deciding what the hell it is you're going to make to actually sitting down and creating the thing. Right. It's this same as making a dance. It's a long, drawn out, studied, detailed process. It's just, instead of using your entire body, you hone it down to this
And you were saying something earlier before, which I think is really important for us to explore. I think one of the big challenges that lots of creatives have is, okay, how am I going to do what I'm wanting to do, and how am I going to sustain myself doing this? And you had talked about a particular point where you were very kind of conscious that you wanted to do something that was sustainable, that worked for you. You may not be able to do the dance at that particular point, and for you to be, I guess, in control of it. You didn't use that necessarily those particular kind of words. From your own observations, because I guess you've done a number of different things around this. You've done bits of teaching. You've run your own dance company for a particular period of time. What's your observations around some of the things that somebody who's a creative should consider in terms of that? I know it's a very broad question, but I guess it's something that often we may not think about earlier in our career, or even sometimes during it. What would you throw out there as some of the really important things in terms of somebody to be mindful of if they wanted to make a living from doing what they're doing? Because often I guess also the challenge of being a creative is sometimes we don't know what all the options are. You took us back to, first of all, when you were in the careers thing. Sometimes we don't know what the options are, even within that field that we've chosen. So I just wondered what your general thoughts about how do you basically make a living from doing what you love?
I think first up, you have to be really honest about what kind of creative you are. For a while, when I started to study jewellery, I imagined I would be able to step out of my being an artist, heavy research-led maker, into someone who could produce a range very quickly and sell it. If I'm really honest, I can't do that. And if I accept that, then I know I'm going to have to balance this bit of my life with making money some other way as well, because this is a slow process. If I do sell something, that's great and will keep me going and I can make the next thing, but there's no guarantees. I never know when that's going to happen.
I really like what you're saying here. I think you're saying a really important point. Know what type of creative that we are. And there are some creatives, and I can think of somebody I know, as you said, that was really interesting, who, as you say, the research, the art is primary to us. We need to create, and we probably need to be in that creative space most of the time, perhaps, or not enough of the time for us to be doing those other aspects. And you're saying that if that's the kind of creative that you are, you really need to spot it, you need to be mindful about it, because then you either need to manage the times when you do need to be out there, or perhaps you need to do something that you did at certain other points, bring in a team. Bring in help. I think that's such a really good point, because as you even say that, I realised maybe I'm a different type of creative. Creativity is important, very dear to me. I'm a creative, but I'm a very intuitive and pragmatic kind of creative. It's really at my core on that expression. But maybe it's also because of my own background, thinking about it. My first background, I guess professionally, was that I worked in media and PR, where you're promoting and selling things. You're selling without selling. So that thing about being out there, connecting and communicating, has always been part of me, and as a singer, it's always been that out there. I get that bit, so I don't struggle with that particular kind of dance. But you even saying that is really, really useful, because I think it is so useful in this thing in terms of creatives, and it really does help me to be mindful about where different creatives are. And I think it's one thing that when I was writing, for example, Song Trader, this book, and I really wanted, in a way, one of the primary audiences is for me was creatives, so that how could they run a business their own way, in their own way, and to be mindful about, with creativity, how you're going to do the dance between being creative and letting your creativity really work for you in and around your business. But also, when were the times whereby you need to make sure, well, okay, how is it, what am I going to do whilst I'm going off on this creative foray over here? Well, how am I going to fund it? And I've been there, where I've said things, be it a pilot TV show, this or that, or whatever. And I think I was quite conscious about it, for example, during a period of time writing the book. How is it that you're going to sustain yourself? And I think that's a really important question, isn't it, for artists, just to merely ask and explore unromantically. Because I just think if we had that dialogue far more often, well, what do we want from the art? Because I guess what you're saying also points us to, what is it you're really wanting to do? I guess back into the mindfulness thing, is it that you're wanting to be a star? Is it that you're wanting to do what it is that you're really wanting to do? And that's not to say that there can't be a crossover, but they are differing things, and they will require differing. That isn't it. That if you're wanting to do something which in a commercial realm, there are certain boxes that certain things are going to need to tick, and that something's going to need to look like. That may well be different if you're completely deciding to go your own way. And I guess it's being really honest about that.
And I think the more you're able to not kid yourself, the more the things you find difficult will fall into place a little bit more, because you've kind of forgiven yourself for being less good at those things.
Let's just break down the cake, because what's saying so important. There's this lovely thing, and you're saying something so important. I want you to say again. You said something fascinating there. Just remind us what you just said there.
The more you acknowledge what kind of artist you are, the more time you can find for the things you're not so good at. And the more you can forgive yourself for being less good at those things. So when you sit down to do those applications or make those phone calls, or you already know that you're not so polished. So you've made your cup of tea and you've sat down and
so you're present. And you can be really present for that. And honour it. And honour it.
And get on with it.
And get on with it. I really like that. And maybe that's a really good point to bring in before we close and wrap up. The work that you've been doing here at the British Library, you've been, I love the title, jeweller in residence. You would have thought something like the British Library had a jeweller in residence, but what we should say is actually British Library's Business and IP Centre, where we're sat here, is really passionate about supporting people who are wanting to be their own boss, start their own business and so on across the board. And it does tend to attract quite a lot of people who are creatives, all sorts of different, from fashions and music, entertainment, dancing, lots of makers and so on. And there's workshops, advice sessions and so on. Tell me a little bit about your role as the jeweller and maker, jeweller in residence, and were you coming into contact with creatives and giving them tips and thoughts or sessions with them? Tell us a little bit about that.
I think the reason they wanted to open up these residences was to be able to bring in people who were practicing artists to delve into the collections, go into the reading rooms, do the research, open it up to people who weren't just studying at uni or doing advanced degrees, or it was open to all of us who were trying to find inspiration and keep our practices going. So I came in to further my research, really. Along with that was the opportunity to, for me it was about making a new website, looking at...
I mean, you were just showing us some here. It's a shame I should have told you to bring some of the... It really looks gorgeous, some of the stuff that I just took a glance of there,
And doing the things I'm normally a bit more like that about.
So you saw that. This is an opportunity also to then, actually, again, that thing you're saying, honouring it. The website, allowing the work to come through, taking that opportunity to really delve into the research and so on,
So for me, the research bit was easy. I just got stuck in. The business side, of course, was a little bit more, okay, so what do I want to do? What will help me?
What's your take on it now? I'm curious. For you, what's the business of being, because you've had all this rounded experience, what's your take on what you're wanting from the business of being a creative from here on in? Because here you are, you've kind of moved from, in the best way, I think, downsized from these, the companies and so on. Actually, something that's not fun for me that can control it and and you've had experience of running your own dance company now. What are you wanting from the business from here on in of being a creative?
I think the integrity of the work is paramount. I think I have to recognise that the path I'm on will be a slow one. I kind of need to be a very badly kept secret.
Oh, that's really like the mind's doing that thing, a really badly kept secret. So you mean in what way that people are, bits of whispers are getting out there?
Because it takes me a long time to make my work.
Right.
But of course I need people to know that I'm there, and I need people to search me out.
Right.
Just people who don't want to walk into a party wearing the same thing as somebody else. Very exclusive, very handmade.
Yeah, so, I like that, because that's the bit where you really do know what, again, the link between you as a creative and as a business person and what the customer wants. There's somebody who wants something special for that particular occasion and to look different because they've got a different approach to stuff,
Yeah, and I need to make sure that I stay happy with that. There's a frustration because, of course, you want to make a living and it's just not happening yet. There's that day-to-day kind of friction. But then you have to bring in whatever else is out there that you're doing to balance that.
I really like what you're saying. I really like what you're saying. I think that thing you said about integrity is so important. Funny enough, I was just recording a couple of things the other day about integrity and so on. And for me, it's so paramount. As a coach, when I'm coaching anybody, creatives or anybody, who are they? What are they wanting? What is business or life about for them? How can they be true and authentic to them? And the more that some of those values are important, as they are, for example, to you, if that is the case, you really can't compromise on that. And I certainly know for myself, in terms of my work and what I do, it's really important that integrity is absolutely number one. And there's not necessarily, for example, something like the book, this book as opposed to the book before it. The first book was a stream of consciousness. It had an integrity to it. Fine, that's what it was. And some of the audio products just record them, capture them, their integrity is there. And obviously, if you're speaking and so on, it's there. With this particular book, because it had to look and thingy a certain kind of way, I was very aware I needed it for the integrity of the heart of the piece that it is. And yet for it to do those things. I wanted it to be a book that spoke to the soul and to sing to somebody, and yet for it to be practically a useful business guidebook. And always checking in with myself, is this true? Is this true to me? And I do that with almost everything. Does this ring true to me? Does it now? I'm working on a project with somebody at the moment. Actually, if it doesn't ring true, I just can't do it. What's the point of doing something? I guess this is one of the things that's really interesting, isn't it? I guess about the journey of the creative. If something's not true, what's the point of doing it? It makes me think. It's really fascinating talking to you around dance. I was watching a thing over the weekend about Nureyev, and I didn't know that much about, apart from obviously, from a famous ballet dance. But what was fascinating, it reminded me again, and I've been watching all the TV shows of dance. The thing I love about dance is that it is so at the core of the expressiveness of the human psyche. There's something about it. And I can't put my finger on it. And I like the fact that I can't put my finger on it. That there's something that's so essential, something so primal, so thingy. And I often used to say to people, I think that if I haven't really said it publicly or anything, if I believed in past lives, I would have probably been a tribal dancer in a past life, is my feeling.
Yeah.
Definitely. Because there's something about dance, the expression of human spirit and so on, and that carries throughout probably all forms of kind of creativity. So this thing about integrity that you're talking about and authenticity is so important because it's important for us. It's important for the audience to know that they're coming along and they were moved. They were touched by that. Somehow it spoke to them. And isn't that incredible that an audience who, aren't technically from that, they get it. They're really present throughout it. I just think that must be one of the joys of being a creative.
Yes, I think for me, if I didn't know that I had thoroughly researched and practiced and rehearsed before I performed something, I'd be ashamed that someone had bought a ticket and come and seen this what. And the same with jewellery. I think if I hadn't put my soul into it, I'd feel like I was ripping somebody off.
Yes. And I think it's interesting how can that play out, isn't it? Because I think that depending on what one's doing, I think that the work, the hours, needs to go into honing one's craft. I guess how somebody, how their craft is expressed through them will be different, isn't it? Sometimes what you're doing literally is going to require the hours of the choreography and putting that in order to come up with a piece in order to perform it. Sometimes if I think about, I don't really think of it in a correct way, but as a speaker, for me, a lot of the work was done actually as a singer. Yeah. So when I'm speaking, the experience of just being used to being in front of people and being able to engage with them, if I hadn't had that, I wouldn't be able to do it.
You're drawing on so much foundation of
it's
voice practice,
Yeah, and so I guess exactly what you mean, and I think there's something about this thing that I love between the spontaneity and the planning that I find fascinating in creativity.
I mean, it's a structured improvisation is a practice in so many art forms, and I think people have this illusion about it being just spontaneous, but the underpinning is
good point. Yeah.
Is vast.
Yeah, you're right, isn't it? That spontaneous thing that we think, oh, that person just, it's the years that they've just done that, it's in their bones, how can they not do it? So it's just there, it's underpinned. So we might think, yeah, it's spontaneous, but what you're seeing is actually so much the experience, the groundedness.
And I'm sure we've both been in a situation where we haven't really winged it on something that we really haven't researched properly, and it's normally a disaster.
It's interesting, it's an interesting one that, because I think that the thing, and it's fascinating what you're saying, because I think that the good thing about what you're saying about that when you know you've done the groundwork, it makes you know how much preparation you need to do for each piece of work, and I think that's one of the things that I find really interesting. So I know that if I've got to deliver a talk or a workshop, how much preparation do I need to do for that thing, and then how much space do I need to allow for it to be what it needs to be on the day when I'm engaging people. So it is that, and when if I'm thinking about doing certain things on radio or TV, I grew up on that, so I can wing some. I wouldn't even call it necessarily winging. You know what you need to know for what you're doing, and I think you're right. I think what you're saying here is really important. I think it's essential that you know that, because what you don't want is a situation where you produce work that you're just not happy with. And I've been there in the past, and I think that I hadn't honed the craft, or I love the bit where you were saying, I love the bit where, Sarah, you were talking about the moments where we were working on our craft. And then, for example, I love the way you were talking about, for example, then one might be doing the business bit, the application or whatever, but doing that mindfully. So then that can be honoured. And I think that if we creatives could honour that bit of it more, I think that we would be in a far richer space to really honour that bit. It would be really, really powerful. And also I'm really passionate about not being too constricted, letting our creativity do its thing. We know that we're inspired. We know that the inspiration is what's called us to do what we do or what have you. So sometimes I think we become like that with it, and if we can just open up a little bit more, then in terms of how we want our careers to be shaped or guided, I'm not saying that just completely sit back, but allowing ourselves also to be creative in the day to day, and for it to be fun. I think that could happen far more, and I think that sometimes we don't allow ourselves to do that.
And understandably so, because the pressures of day to day can be really difficult. You might have kids to feed, and food to buy, and bills to pay, and how do you balance that with this life vision that we have for ourselves, which can be very important to us, but can seem very self-indulgent.
Oh yeah. How much time have we got here? Because
how do you do that? And you may have a partner who needs help, who isn't struggling with their life plan, and you might have to step into the breach.
And this is where it comes back to what you were saying before. I think that we need to. I think that thing about being really honest and clear. Who am I? What's really important to me? What's important to my life? What's important in my career? How much is it important for me just to be who it is I am and express who I am? And then that may well impact even those kind of conversations, isn't it, with partners and so on, so that they can understand where we're coming from. If I'm just suddenly there's somebody speaking to me and I'm hearing a piece of music and I'm somewhere else, because that's how music affects me. Maybe it's worth them. It's not, I'm not ignoring you, but I guess that's one of the things, isn't it, about our art. So I think it's important for us to be really mindful about that. What is it that we're wanting from it, and then being creative and resourceful around that. Does that mean that we do something over here that allows that? I like the things that you considered. Actually, could it mean that I could be doing some trick teaching over here that still allows me to be involved in what I do? But and it's really interesting to say that. Just before we close, I was talking to a friend of mine just earlier who is in a particular field, which is in a way a creative field. When I was trying to encourage him to do it, and he does need to be quite pragmatic at the moment in terms of money and so on. But what I didn't want him to do is to completely leave this thing that he has the years of experience in that is worth a lot of money. Also, so that people can not realise, because if you don't value it, people may not always value it, because there's often a way in which you can utilise that in order to fund stuff, even if it's slightly lateral. Yeah. But I think if you leave that behind, I'm actually personally not sure from my own experience how much you can completely leave creativity behind. I certainly know from my own experience when I became a coach, suddenly all the other bits crept up. It made sense with the sing and the perform and the thing, and I now see them all in the work that I do now. So I think that being creative isn't something, to me, that you could ever run away from, and who would want to?
Yes, it won't be very far behind.
Yeah, it won't be very far behind.
Looking at your heels.
Well, it's been I can't tell you, it's been such a pleasure to chat to you. Tell me a little bit about, just before we close, so if people trying to find you, if they want to find this wonderful jewellery, can you give us the website address?
Yes, it's sarahwarsop.com.
Yep, wonderful.
And they can go there and they can look at my jewellery and my dance work, and they can contact me through there.
Fantastic. And just aspirations from here, you talked a little bit about, you just want to do work that you really love and so on, but any aspirations? Would you word anything more, anything else that you're really particularly wanting, or anything that's particularly in view or important to you right now?
I have an inkling that maybe jewellery won't be the end of it.
Right.
That maybe these small things over the next, not yet, but maybe in 10 years' time, they might be getting bigger. I don't know.
We have to watch this space, or a bigger space, and see. It's interesting, that space thing from there. Wonderful. It's been such a joy speaking to you. I'm going to leave you to smile as I turn off the camera, but it's been such a joy, and I hope people do check out the website, the jewellery, and all the best with all your future projects.
Thank you.
Take care.